A seminary. Now, what do we associate the word seminary with? Seminar, yes, or, Connor?
Like
a religious training. But Adams doesn't mean religious training here. He doesn't. He has the seminar association with it. And where does the word seminar come from? Where does the word seminar come from? What word is it related to?
Related to semantics?
Nope. Good guess, though. No, it's related actually to the word seed or semen. A seminar is a place where seedlings grow up. So a seminary is a place of training from the initial planting of the seed to when it germinates and becomes a full-grown plant or individual. It is an idea too flattering to indolence and vanity not to have many believers that all the knowledge of the sciences, which can be of use in the common affairs of life, is to be acquired at the university. According to this estimate of things, a liberal education means no more than the acquisition of a degree, which I think is an incredibly pernicious idea. If that's what it means, then everybody just gets a credential and that's it. Once you have it, you're done. And that's not at all what it means. Liberal education never ends. You get the degree, that's nice, but a liberal education has no limit. It has no end date. It has no expiration. The practice upon this doctrine will never make an accomplished orator. The student who aspires to the attainment of that proud eminence must consider himself as able to acquire here nothing more than the elements of useful knowledge, a mere introduction to the porches of science. These fountains of the muses are destined not to quench but to provoke thirst. Here he can learn only to be his own teacher hereafter. So this important statement, I think, by Adams, he's saying this place, Harvard Yard, the Seaver Hall, Emerson, Harvard Hall, whatever, it's a step. It's a seminary. But it's just the very beginning, honestly. That's all it is. So, in a sense, what he's saying is that what you do here and now, you're actually doing for the future. And I would say there's something of a corollary, at least in my mind, that the college and the university then is not primarily a place for personal success as such. I do suggest that real personal success comes later in life. Yes, there are prizes at the college or university. Yes, you want to succeed. But almost all of that tends to be internal to the institution itself. Maybe not all of it, but a lot of it. It's a place for success in some ways, but it has always been regarded as well as a place of dedication, in a way that professional life sometimes is not. Why? Because you have the opportunity at a college or seminary or university to dedicate yourself to something without the immediate need of representing anyone, making any money, doing anything that's going to affect someone else. Now, might you still want to make money? Yes. Might you want to do something that affects someone else? Yes. But that is not the principal purpose for the existence of the institution. It is a subsidiary set of purposes. The principal purpose is a time of dedication and, if I could put it this way, pressing the matter a little, a time of quasi-isolation from the demands that life will later put on you, and maybe very heavily. Whether it is raising a family or paying a mortgage or going into service of some kind, or just simply getting up every morning at 6 o'clock so you can start in the operating theater at 7:30 or in the courtroom at 9 or at the design of some building at 8 or whatever, and do that day after day after day. So Adams, in addressing Harvard students here, that's what these lectures were, they were addressed to Harvard students, is saying, you know, you ought to treasure this time some because you are released for a period of time. Ask, who's a senior here? Your time at Harvard went by very, very slowly, and you're not at all surprised that it's done this quickly, is that right? No, see, they're going like this. Yes, and who's here in their first year? Right. It will not be too long before you are sitting in such a chair and saying to yourself, I'm not going to be here in another month or two. Doesn't seem like that now, but you may at that time remember this moment and you will say, wow, that went fast. Doesn't last all that long. All right, this is ethos. Adams is very big on it. Let's turn to some examples. Let's turn to Franklin's speech at the Constitutional Convention. This is in the source book also. You're going to find this on page 20. Franklin is, he's really elderly at this time. He's not just old, he's really quite elderly. He has held important positions for the fledgling government. He spent time in France. He was an emissary to France. He helped the United States secure in large measure the help of the French, of General Lafayette, of money. It would have been a much dicier American Revolution if France had not stepped in with some support. So this is from Franklin at the convention. I confess that I do not entirely approve of this Constitution at present. That's a very interesting opening. I confess. First of all, it's a confession. How many orators begin with I confess? I confess that I do not entirely. Interesting adverb, and it's there for a reason. I do not entirely approve of this Constitution at present. But, sir, I am not sure I shall never approve it. For having lived long, I have experienced many instances of being obliged by better information or fuller consideration to change opinions even on important subjects which I once thought right, but found to be otherwise. This is part of a pretty extraordinary introduction to this short address, which I think goes on just a little farther. It is therefore that the older I grow, the more apt I am to doubt my own judgment and to pay more respect to the judgment of others. Now, at this point, you might ask yourself the following question. If you are particularly in the mind of scrutinizing Franklin, you might say, well, maybe he really was completely in favor of this Constitution and he's just saying this for effect. I don't think that's true. Did anyone think the Constitution was a perfect instrument? I don't think so. Not a perfect instrument. Matter of fact, it says right in the Constitution, in order to form a more perfect union, meaning more worked through, increasingly better. And as we discussed one time in class briefly, the Constitution was thought so lax in some points that what was added to it afterward? Bill of Rights, yes. Very, very important part of the Constitution. And originally 12 amendments were proposed for the Bill of Rights. And 2 of the 12 were rejected, and 10 became the original Bill of Rights. Interesting. So even the Bill of Rights, which was proposed, was found to be wanting in some way, and 2 of those amendments were not adopted. Most men, indeed, as well as most sects in religion, think themselves in possession of all truth. Now I think he's moved away to some degree from the introduction, and that whenever others differ from them, it is so far error. Steele, he's speaking here of a man who wrote periodical essays in England. Steele, a Protestant in a dedication, tells the Pope that the only difference between our two churches is the opinions of the certainty of their doctrine is the Romish Church is infallible and the Church of England is never in the wrong. Well, you can't have them both, can you? He then goes on to tell a little story about a certain French lady who in a little dispute with her sister said, I don't know how it happens, sister, but I meet with nobody but myself that is always in the right. We could probably say this about ourselves. How often did you get in an argument when you knew you were wrong and just wanted to argue anyway? Probably not very often. Yeah? Sometimes. With your brother, oh, family matters. Family matters are always different. We have to put family matters completely aside. Thanksgiving is coming up. You all have a nice Thanksgiving with your family. Put those matters aside. All right. So, in these sentiments, sir, he then says after quoting the French, il n'y a que moi qui a toujours raison. In these sentiments, sir, and a lot of weight is carried by that phrase, meaning thinking now about the fact that most people and most religions and most individuals, when arguing, they always think they're in the right, and sometimes very passionately so. In these sentiments, I agree to this Constitution with all its faults, if they are such, because I think a general government necessary for us, and there is no form of government but what may be a blessing if well administered. That's a kind of shocking statement in some ways. There is no form of government but what may be a blessing if well administered. And then he goes on to say it's likely that this government, represented by this Constitution, will be well administered for a course of years. Well, eventually the people shall perhaps become so corrupted as to need despotic government, being incapable of any other. For when you assemble a number of men, this is on 433, to have the advantage of their joint wisdom, you inevitably assemble with those men all their prejudices, all their passions, their errors of opinion, their local interests, and their selfish views. From such an assembly, can a perfect production be expected? Can you really expect perfection? We sometimes summarize Franklin's notice here, and you probably have heard the expression, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. In other words, when you are trying to achieve something, if you insist on what you regard as the perfect solution, and everyone insists on what they regard as the perfect solution, you are liable to end up with no solution at all. It is almost required in those cases that there be some form of compromise, or at least some willingness to suspend one's doubts about part of what is being done. It therefore astonishes me to find the system approaching so near to perfection as it does, and I think it will astonish our enemies, who are waiting with confidence to hear that our counsels are confounded, like those of the builders of Babylon, and that our states are on the point of separation, only to meet hereafter for the purpose of cutting each other's throats. So what was that early American flag that represented different colonies in different ways? Do you remember, anyone remember that early American flag, Katie?
Is it the snake that's been cut?
Yes, the snake that's been cut. And it's all these parts of the snake representing each part a colony. The snake that's been cut. Or as Franklin said, I think it was Franklin said otherwise, to all the rebels who were pursuing the American Revolution, either we hang together or we hang separately. Meaning either we stick together or we're all going to be strung up one by one. That solidarity is necessary. This is now about 2/3 of the way down here. If every one of us, in returning to our constituents, were to report the objections he has had to it and endeavor to gain partisans in support of them, we might prevent its being generally received. In other words, you can pull it down, you can destroy it. If you go after something, even something pretty good, and you do it with great vigor, you can pretty much so hope that you will be able to prevent it, even if you are in a minority. There are many instances of this. Moreover, Franklin is saying, who will this make happy? If that happens, who will be happy? Our enemies, yes, yes. The powers in Europe who are just waiting for the states to fall apart. States fall apart. Maybe the British get to march in again. Did the British ever march in again? Yeah, they did. There's another war called the War of 1812. Sure, they marched in again. There were enemies. So Franklin, in part, is saying, don't make them happy. Then I just want to conclude by reading this particular sentence, which is near the bottom of that page 21. Much of the strength and efficiency of any government in procuring and securing happiness to the people depends on opinion. on the general opinion of the goodness of that government, as well as of the wisdom and integrity of its governors. And what Franklin, in effect, is saying here is just as much of your crediting or believing in an order depends on your trust in that individual, so the same goes for government. If you don't trust your government, for whatever reason, will you trust anything that government does? Well, your first reaction will be not to trust it, or very likely will be not to trust it. So Franklin is running a parallel course with Adams here, in the sense that Adams says, if you want to be a good advocate, if you want to be a good orator, what you really need to do is establish that integrity and trust so that your audience will credit you. And Franklin is saying, in order to have a government that works well to secure the happiness of people, it has to secure their trust. If the government doesn't have trust, it will not be able to work well. Now, securing trust as a government is not the same as distrusting a certain politician, or distrusting a certain political platform, or distrusting a certain proposition made politically. Trust in government means trust in the entire process of government as it is carried out, not in one particular party, one particular person, or one particular action. So to draw that distinction. So Franklin, I think, here is being very canny. He's being, I would say, very honest. Could Franklin come up with objections to the Constitution? I am sure he could. And there were a number of objections. We've already read the debate about the ratification, in which Patrick Henry comes up with many objections. And Franklin is saying, if you want to find them, you can find them. If you want to magnify them, you can magnify them. If you want to get other people to join you, you can. If you want to pull the thing down, you can. You can do that. And Franklin is saying, I'm not so sure this is great, but I am aware of the fact that human nature, being what it is, prejudices, passions, errors, interests, and selfish views, that this is pretty good. Let us start here and then work from that. It's a remarkable address. We tend to take for granted in some ways, whether we think it good or ill or like what it's doing currently or not, we take for granted the existence of our government, as most people do the existence of their governments. The existence of the government of the United States at this time was completely up in the air. It was tenuous, at best. Let's turn to Washington. This is just less than a decade later, really. This is page 91 from his farewell address. And what is one of the first things that Washington mentions in this excerpt? The same kind of thing that Franklin had mentioned in his address almost a decade earlier. There are geographical discriminations, northern and southern, Atlantic and western. Do these still exist in this country? Yes, of course they do. Very much so, in various ways. There is a real difference of local interests and views. One of the expedients of party to acquire influence within particular districts is to misrepresent the opinions and aims of other districts. This creates jealousies and heartburnings, which spring from these misrepresentations. They tend to render alien to each other those who ought to be bound together by fraternal affection. And this is Washington basically warning again, saying, yeah, you can pull things apart. Actually not all that hard. Because it's a big country. There are all these local interests. People have different views. They come from different backgrounds. They hold different religious beliefs. You want to pull it apart? Okay. It's not all that hard. It isn't. And of course, we know later it did get pulled apart and resulted in a very terrible civil war. Over on the right-hand column then, Washington makes a statement which becomes a doctrine of what was later called Union theology, and something that Lincoln held close to. The basis of our political systems is the right of the people to make and to alter their constitutions of government. But the Constitution, which at any time exists, till changed by an explicit and authentic act of the whole people, is sacredly obligatory upon all.